Tessa O'Connor's day was a relentless blur, a dizzying dance between the sharp scent of espresso beans and the soaring, complex melodies of Tchaikovsky. She'd spent hours hunched over her violin at the conservatory, her fingers aching but her spirit alight, then rushed to her barista shift in Koreatown, the clatter of ceramic mugs replacing the delicate notes. Her rosin-stained violin case was always with her, a heavy, cherished promise of a future she was fiercely fighting for, a future where music, not just survival, defined her, but lately an even heavier secret pressed against her ribs. The baby growing inside her was a closely guarded truth, known only to a precious few, a vulnerability she couldn't afford to show the world. Every ache, every flutter was a reminder of the immense responsibility she carried alone. Her hand instinctively found the thin plastic band on her wrist, her prenatal clinic bracelet, a tiny bright flag of her hidden hope. The neon glow of Koreatown usually felt like a shield, a vibrant, living presence that swallowed her worries. Tonight, walking home from a late practice session, the familiar lights seemed to mock her. The alley she cut through was darker than usual, the shadows deep and hungry. Two figures detached themselves from the brick wall, their silhouettes growing larger, more menacing, with every thud of her heart. "Well, well, look what we have here!" a gravelly voice sneered. Tessa froze. She knew that voice. It belonged to one of Mark's goons, a man named Cho. Her ex-boyfriend's bad decisions had become her nightmare, the loan sharks a constant, chilling threat. "Where's Mark, sweetie?" the second man, taller and leaner, drawled, stepping closer. His eyes dropped to her swollen belly, then flicked to the violin case clutched in her hand. "We know you're carrying his debt, and something else." Cho flashed a stack of papers, the edges crisp and dangerous. Tessa's blood ran cold. She recognized the typeface, the legal jargon, forged cosigner papers. They wanted money she didn't have for a debt that wasn't hers. Her breath hitched. The baby. They knew about the baby. A tremor ran through her, fear a cold, raw hand squeezing her throat. She pressed her hand tighter to her stomach, shielding her unborn child. "You owe us, Tessa, or things are going to get very, very unpleasant for you. And that little inconvenience." Cho's smile was predatory. The words shattered her fragile composure. All the stress, the endless struggle, the terrifying loneliness erupted. A sob tore from her throat, raw and uncontrolled. Tears streamed down her face, blurring the harsh neon into streaks of hostile light. She sank against the grimy wall, clutching her violin case, her body shaking, openly crying in the alley like a broken child. She felt utterly, completely helpless. Then a ripple in the periphery. A sleek, obsidian-dark sedan glided to a silent stop at the mouth of the alley. The driver's side door opened. A man stepped out. He was tall, formidable, dressed in a tailored suit that seemed to absorb the meager light. Min-Jun Park. Tessa had seen him before, glimpsed him in passing, heard whispers of his name, a powerful figure in this intricate city. He moved with an effortless authority that was unnerving. Min-Jun observed the scene, his gaze like ice, cutting through the panic and the shadows. He didn't speak, not to her, not to the sharks. His eyes, dark and unreadable, held a calculating intensity. He simply raised a hand, a subtle, almost imperceptible gesture. Two more men, built like stone, emerged from the sedan, moving with an alarming swiftness. They didn't draw weapons, didn't utter a word. They simply positioned themselves, one on either side of Cho and his partner, their presence radiating an undeniable, silent threat. The loan sharks, caught off guard, suddenly looked less intimidating, their bravado evaporating under the stoic, unwavering scrutiny. With another silent signal from Minjun, his men ushered the two sharks back towards their own waiting car, their movements firm, non-violent, but leaving no room for argument. They melted away into the night as quickly as they'd appeared. The alley was silent again, save for Tessa's ragged breathing. Minjun turned his attention to her. His eyes, though still unyielding, softened by a fraction. He saw the tears, the raw fear, the undeniable vulnerability of her pregnant form. He saw the prenatal clinic bracelet. "You are safe now," he said, his voice a low, resonant hum, surprisingly calm. His gaze held hers, an anchor in her storm. He took a single step closer, then gestured towards his car, the dark maw of its open door an invitation, or perhaps a command. "Bring her to me." Tessa was terrified. She felt a primal instinct to run, to protect herself and her baby from this new, unknown power. But the streets were empty, her tears still wet on her cheeks, and the cold reality of her. Helplessness pressed in. Minjun Park, dangerous as he might be, had just saved her. She saw no other choice. Her legs, still trembling, pushed her to her feet. She clutched her violin case tighter and walked towards the waiting car. The scent of expensive leather and something clean, almost sterile, filled Tessa's nostrils. It was a stark contrast to the stale alley air, the lingering fear, and the cheap coffee aroma usually clinging to her clothes. Minjun's sedan had moved through the night. With silent speed, depositing her not at some shadowy hideout, but into the hushed, almost reverent lobby of a downtown LA skyscraper. Now she stood in an office that swallowed sound, a vast space of polished dark wood, gleaming chrome, and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over a glittering, uncaring city. It was opulent, austere, and utterly terrifying. Her humble apartment, with its chipped paint and stacks of sheet music, felt 1,000,000 miles away. This was a new world, dangerous and seductive in its power. Tessa clutched her rosin-stained violin case like a shield, her knuckles white. It was the last piece of her old life, a symbol of everything she was fighting to keep. Minjun moved with the same quiet authority he'd displayed in the alley. He shed his tailored jacket, revealing a crisp white shirt that seemed to glow in the subdued lighting. He didn't sit behind a massive desk, but chose a low, minimalist sofa, gesturing for her to take the one opposite. His eyes, dark and penetrating, never left her. "You are safe here, Tessa O'Connor," he said, his voice a low, steady current in the vast room. It was the first time he'd spoken her full name, and it felt like a brand, a claim. He leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, his posture relaxed, yet radiating an undeniable tension. "My organization operates with a code. We do not harm families. We especially do not tolerate threats against pregnant women." Tessa swallowed, her throat dry. The words were meant to be reassuring, she knew, but they only heightened her sense of being trapped. He spoke of an organization, not just himself. He spoke of code. This was not just a powerful man. This was a man who commanded power, who lived by his own rules. "The men in the alley," he continued, his gaze unwavering, "they operate outside the lines. They use predatory practices, exploit the vulnerable. It goes against everything I stand for within this community." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. "My focus is financial restitution over violence. Community first, always." He didn't apologize for the fear, didn't offer a gentle word about her tears. He simply stated facts, his truth. He had saved her, yes, but she was acutely aware that she was now a piece on his chessboard. He'd drawn her into his orbit, and the gravity of it was immense. Thank you," Tessa managed, her voice barely a whisper. The gratitude was real, a raw, burning ember in her chest. She was no longer running. No longer facing the gnawing terror of the loan sharks, but the relief was laced with a chilling anxiety. What did this protection cost? Min Jun simply nodded, a subtle tilt of his head. You are under my protection now. Your safety and the safety of your child is assured. He didn't elaborate. He didn't ask her what she wanted or what she would do. He didn't mention terms or conditions. He simply stated a fact, a decree. She was safe. She was protected. But the silence that followed felt heavy, like the walls of a gilded cage. He had plucked her from the street, from danger, but he hadn't given her back her freedom. Her fierce independence, the very core of who she was, screamed in protest. She was grateful, yes, profoundly so, but a dangerous dependency had begun to form, a silken thread binding her to this formidable man, to this opulent, terrifying new world. She was protected, but at what cost to herself? She didn't know, and that uncertainty was a new kind of terror. The silence in Min Jun's opulent office, once a fragile shield, now felt like a suffocating blanket. Tessa was still reeling from his quiet decree, the weight of his protection pressing down on her. Her mind raced, dissecting his words. You are under my protection now. It sounded like a promise, but felt like a dangerous surrender. Her gaze flickered to him, still unreadable, still utterly in control. He broke the quiet, his voice pulling her back, stark and devoid of emotion. The men who threatened you. In the alley, he began. They are part of a larger network, a system designed to ensnare the vulnerable. Your ex-boyfriend Mark was merely a pawn, though a willing one, in their game. He picked up a sleek tablet from the low table between them, swiping it once before turning the screen to face her. Images of documents flashed, horrifyingly familiar. These are the forged co-signer papers, he stated, his finger tapping a blurred signature. A common tactic. They prey on desperation, on a lack of legal knowledge. They create an illusion of shared liability, then tighten the noose. It's a debt trap, Tessa, a sophisticated form of extortion. Tessa's stomach churned. It was worse than she'd imagined, not just street thugs, but a calculated, organized scheme. She remembered the cold fear when Cho had flashed those papers. The knot in her chest tightened, a familiar squeeze of anxiety. Min Jun watched her, his expression still impassive, yet his gaze was sharp, dissecting her. Reaction. My initial proposal is this. I can make this debt disappear, entirely. The papers, the threats, the men themselves. They will vanish from your life. You and your child will have a new, safe existence. No one will ever bother you again. He slid a physical document across the polished surface of the table. It was thick, heavy parchment, bound with a dark ribbon. At the bottom, a prominent, perfectly circular red thumbprint stood out against the stark white, next to a crisp notary. Seal. It wasn't a contract for her to sign, not yet, but a declaration, a symbol of his power, of the binding nature of his world. Erasure. That was his offer. A clean slate, paid for by his unseen hand, sealed by his silent authority. For a breathless moment, Tessa considered it. An end to the terror. A new life, free from the shadow of Mark's mistakes, safe for her baby. The temptation was immense, a siren song of peace. But then, a cold spark of clarity ignited within her. Erasure. That wasn't justice. That was sweeping the dirt under the rug. She pushed the document back, her hand shaking slightly, not from fear, but from a burgeoning righteous anger. No, she said, her voice stronger than she expected, a surprising defiance in the quiet room. Min Jun's dark eyebrows lifted, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. It wasn't anger, not exactly, but surprise, perhaps even a hint of intrigue. No? He echoed, The single word a question, a challenge. "No," Tessa repeated, meeting his gaze directly. "You say they exploit the vulnerable. You say it's a system. If you just make my debt disappear, if you just make them vanish from my life, what about the next woman, the next family? They'll just find someone else, someone weaker, someone with less protection." Her voice rose, fueled by indignation. "This isn't about just me, Min-jun. It's about everyone they've trapped, everyone they will trap." She leaned forward, her hands flat on the table, her prenatal clinic. Bracelet, a stark white band against her skin. "I don't want erasure. I want exposure. I want restitution. Not just for me, but for every other person they've hurt. These sharks need to be stopped, truly stopped, not just redirected." Her breath came in short, sharp gasps. She had just refused the most powerful man she knew, a man who had saved her life, a man who could erase her problems with a single gesture. Her fiercely independent spirit, honed by years of doing it all alone, refused to be bought with simple safety. Her integrity, her deep-seated need for fairness, clashed head-on with his pragmatic solution. The air between them crackled with the unspoken tension of their opposing wills. Min-jun's gaze was still unreadable, but a new intensity entered his dark eyes. The shock of her defiance still hummed in the air, a silent challenge Tessa had never thought herself capable of voicing. But the moment she left Min-jun's office, the heady rush of indignation gave way to the cold, stark reality of her situation. She couldn't just demand justice, she had to make it happen, and she had no idea how. Her first calls were to friends, hesitant whispers about a problem with an old debt, carefully omitting the true danger and the baby. Their responses were kind, but useless. They offered sympathy, not solutions. Next, she trawled online forums, legal aid websites, her fingers blurring across her phone screen. Every article, every piece of advice hit the same impenetrable wall. Loan shark debt was notoriously difficult to fight, especially when forged documents were involved. The advice was always the same: pay it or disappear. She even tried a free legal clinic, waiting for hours in a stuffy room before a harried young lawyer listened patiently, then shook her head. Without original, verifiable signatures, it's a he said, she said. And these organizations, they're untouchable, Ms. O'Connor. They have layers. They make people vanish. I'm sorry. Tessa walked out, the words echoing in her ears, a chilling confirmation of Min-jun's power. He hadn't just made empty threats, he dealt in realities. The sharks were dangerous, the debt was complex, and she, alone, was utterly outmatched. A week passed, a blur of sleepless nights and increasingly desperate research. The freedom she'd felt in refusing Min-jun withered, replaced by a growing, sickening dread. The loan sharks hadn't resurfaced, a testament to Min-jun's immediate unspoken protection, but it felt like a temporary reprieve, not a lasting solution. Her fierce independence, usually her greatest strength, was now a heavy burden. She needed help, and there was only one person who could truly offer it. With a heavy heart, but a renewed resolve, Tessa found herself back at the towering building, back in the hushed lobby. She felt a profound sense of defeat, but also a sliver of something else, a stubborn hope that her initial refusal had somehow resonated with him. Min-jun was waiting. He didn't chide. Her didn't gloat. His gaze was simply assessing, as if he'd known she would return. "I tried," Tessa said, her voice quiet but firm, refusing to sound broken. "I tried to find another way. There isn't one. You were right. They're too deep, too protected." She met his eyes, a flicker of vulnerability, quickly masked by her determined resolve. "I will accept your protection, But my terms haven't changed. I still want justice. I still want exposure for everyone. A muscle twitched in Minjun's jaw, almost imperceptible. He studied her, his dark eyes seeming to peel back layers of her carefully constructed composure. He saw the fatigue, the fear, but also the unwavering fire in her spirit. It was a fire he seemed to respect. "You are a persistent woman, Tessa O'Connor," he finally said, a hint of something that might have been approval in his tone. "And you speak of community, of integrity." He paused, a subtle shift in his posture, a slight softening around the edges of his formidable presence. Tessa had heard whispers, vague rumors in Koreatown cafes, of Minjun Park's quiet generosity, the anonymous donations to local schools, to struggling families. She'd dismissed them as PR, as a cover for something darker. Now, looking at him, a sliver of doubt crept into her cynical mind. Was there more to him than the calculated power? Was his community-first code not just a mantra, but a genuine conviction? Without another word, Minjun reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small, intricately carved jade key fob, smooth and cool, the stone a deep, vibrant green. It wasn't ornate, but simple, elegant, weighty. He held it out to her. "This is for you," he said, his voice low. "A new apartment, in Koreatown. Secure, safe." He watched her carefully as she took the key fob, her fingers brushing his. A jolt, unexpected and electric, passed between them. His touch was firm, not possessive, but undeniably present. "It is not a cage, Tessa," he clarified, as if reading her thoughts. "It is a sanctuary, a place where you can be safe, where you can think, where you can protect your child." His gaze dropped briefly to her belly, then back to her eyes, holding hers in a silent, intense understanding. "Consider it a down payment on our alliance." The jade felt solid in her palm, cool against her skin. It was a symbol, she realized, not just of protection, but of a grudging trust, a bridge into his world that didn't demand her complete surrender. She was accepting. His help, yes, but on her own terms, fueled by her own demand for something more profound than mere safety. The tension between them, once purely adversarial, now held a new, complex current. A shared purpose, a dangerous dance, and the undeniable, unsettling hum of a growing, undeniable attraction. The jade key fob felt cool and solid in Tessa's palm, a strange anchor in the churning storm of her emotions. Minjun's words, "It is not a cage, Tessa, it is a sanctuary," echoed in her mind. He hadn't just dismissed her defiance. He'd listened. He'd seen something in her stubborn refusal, in her demand for justice that resonated with his own cryptic code. The realization sent a shiver down her spine, a mix of relief and a new, unsettling awareness of the man before her. He watched her, his gaze unwavering, and Tessa felt a shift, subtle but profound, in the air between them. The tension, once a rigid wall of opposing wills, now pulsed with a dangerous shared current. His expression, usually a mask of stoic control, held a flicker of something she couldn't quite name. Respect, perhaps, or a calculated recognition of her spirit. "Your insistence on exposure," Minjun began, his voice still low but now with a softer edge. "Your desire for restitution, for the protection of others, it aligns with my own long-term goals for this community." He leaned back slightly, his posture still formidable, but less overtly challenging. "Sweeping problems under the rug only allows them to fester. True safety comes from dismantling the root cause." Tessa's breath hitched. He wasn't just offering protection anymore. He was acknowledging her vision, her fierce need for more than just personal escape. He was offering a path to meaning. These debt traps, he continued, his eyes darkening with a familiar intensity, they are a poison. My methods typically involve quiet removal, financial pressure. But you are right. Without public accountability, without real exposure, they will simply resurface elsewhere. He looked at her then, a long, searching gaze that seemed to strip away her defenses, laying bare her strength and her fear. You are not just a victim, Tessa O'Connor. You are intelligent. You have an unparalleled understanding of their methods, of their targets, your unique position as someone they have tried to ensnare. It makes you invaluable. A wave of shock, then exhilaration washed over her. He wasn't just protecting her, he wanted her to be an active participant. He wanted her to help him dismantle this insidious network from the inside. It was terrifying, dangerous, but it was also exactly what she had demanded. This wasn't about being owned, it was about being an ally. "You want me to help you?" she asked, the words barely a whisper. Minjun nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. "Not just receive protection, Tessa. To earn it, to actively work with me, to understand their operations, to find their weak points, to expose them." Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was a whole new level of dangerous, a commitment that went far beyond mere survival. It meant stepping deeper into his world, into the shadows, but it also meant reclaiming her agency, fighting not just for herself, but for others. "How?" she pressed, her mind already racing, the violinist's analytical precision kicking in. "How do we do it? What would I do?" A faint, almost imperceptible curve touched the corner of Minjun's lips, a ghost of a smile. It was the first time she'd seen anything close to warmth on his face, and it sent an unexpected jolt through her. "We begin by understanding," he said, his voice now imbued with a quiet purpose. "We study their patterns, their connections. We identify their vulnerabilities. You, with your insight as someone they targeted, will be crucial." He leaned forward, and the air between them crackled with a new kind of energy. It wasn't just about safety versus freedom anymore. It was about a shared mission, a dangerous, thrilling alliance. Their gazes locked, and in that moment Tessa felt an undeniable pull, a connection forged in the crucible of danger and a shared purpose. The tension was still there, but it had morphed into something deeper, more complex, infused with a potent, unspoken attraction that was both exhilarating and profoundly unsettling. They had found their common ground, and the game had just begun. The jade key fob, cool and smooth in Tessa's palm, felt less like a sanctuary key, and more like a heavy burden. Minjun's apartment was everything he'd promised, secure, opulent, silent. But the silence only amplified the frantic beat of her own heart. She was safe, for now. But the world outside wasn't. Minjun's calls came frequently, his voice a low, steady current that always carried a hint of warning. His network, vast and invisible, was reporting back. The sharks were not retreating. They were enraged. "They're moving, Tessa," he said one morning, his tone grave, pulling her from a restless sleep. "Angrier than before. They've been seen around your old apartment building, near the conservatory. They want you." A cold knot formed in her stomach, tightening around her baby. Her old life, her past, was still a gaping wound, a magnet for danger. She squeezed her eyes shut, picturing the familiar streets, now tainted with unseen eyes. "Their boss, a man named Kim, does not tolerate interference," Minjun continued, his voice hardening, each word a chisel. "Against her fragile calm, he sees you as a direct challenge, a loose end he needs to tie up, permanently." The word hung in the air, chilling her to the bone. Permanently. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about power, about a twisted form of retribution. Kim's ruthlessness was a palpable threat, reaching even into her gilded cage. Tessa couldn't just hide, not when her baby's future depended on more than just Minjun's protection. She had demanded justice, exposure. Now she had to earn it. She thought of Mark, her ex, and the shadowy corners of Koreatown he'd frequented, the dingy billiards hall, thick with cigarette smoke, the late-night noodle shop where he'd meet his shadier contacts, whispering deals over steaming bowls, places she'd always avoided, sensing their toxicity. Now they were potential sources of information, dangerous yet vital. Disguised in a plain baseball cap pulled low, oversized sunglasses obscuring her face, and a loose hoodie hiding her growing belly, Tessa began her own covert observations. She couldn't risk being recognized, couldn't risk drawing attention. Every flutter in her womb was a sharp reminder of the stakes, igniting a fierce protective fire within her. She lurked in alleys across from Mark's old haunts, sat for hours in her car a block away, watching. She saw familiar faces, low-level thugs, their shoulders hunched, their eyes darting. She noted their beat-up sedans, their precise routines, the times they exchanged hushed words with other men. She watched money change hands, quick, furtive exchanges in dimly lit doorways, a silent ballet of illicit transactions. The world Minjun spoke of, the system, was unfolding before her eyes. One evening, she saw Cho, the man from the alley, arguing heatedly with another man near a delivery truck. Cho's face was contorted with frustration, desperation. He was clearly under pressure. Minjun's interference, his silent power, was working. The sharks were cornered, agitated, and therefore more dangerous. She relayed everything to Minjun, her observations precise, her deductions sharp. He listened, his silence sometimes more intimidating than his words. "Excellent, Tessa," he finally said, a hint of approval in his tone. "You have an eye for detail, a talent for observation." He explained his strategy, his voice a low, steady hum. "We cannot engage in violence. My code is clear. No harm to families, financial restitution over violence. Kim's men will not be touched, but we can use their desperation, their predictable patterns, to expose their weaknesses. We need evidence, irrefutable proof of their fraud, their network." The conflict deepened, stretching far beyond her personal safety. It was about dismantling a system, carefully, meticulously, without bloodshed. Minjun's code, a strange paradox of control and restraint, was both his greatest strength and his most critical limitation. And Tessa, a conservatory violinist with a baby on the way, was now at the heart of his dangerous, calculated game. The jade key fob had promised sanctuary, and for a short, fragile time, it had delivered. Tessa had found a rhythm in the new apartment, a quiet space where the city's roar was muffled, where she could almost forget the lurking shadows. She spent her days practicing the violin, the melodies a balm to her frayed nerves, and her nights analyzing the intel she'd gathered for Minjun, mapping out the loan shark's movements, trying to make sense of their dark world. The sense of security, though temporary, had allowed her a fragile peace. That peace shattered one evening, like a dropped rosin cake. She was in the small, elegant kitchen, preparing a simple dinner, the scent of garlic and herbs filling the air. Her violin was resting on its stand in the living room, a half-finished sonata still echoing in her mind. A sudden, jarring thud from the hallway outside her door made her freeze. Her hand flew to her stomach, a primal instinct to protect. It wasn't the usual apartment noise. It was too heavy, too deliberate. Then came the voices, low and guttural, muffled but undeniable. She recognized one of them instantly, Cho, the gravelly sneer that had haunted her nightmares. He was here, at her door, the supposedly safe, unfindable apartment. Panic clawed at her throat, cold and sharp. How? How had they found her? Minjun's protection, his impenetrable network, had been breached. She backed away from the kitchen counter, heart hammering against her ribs, every muscle screaming for her to run, to hide. The jade key fob, once a symbol of hope, now felt like a cruel trick. A metallic screech, then a louder bang, as if someone was trying to force the lock. She heard Cho's voice, clearer now, laced with furious triumph. "She's in here! The boss wants his payment, you little whore!" Tessa gasped, a silent, choked sound. She pressed herself against the wall, her breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps. The baby kicked, frantic flutter that mirrored her own terror. This wasn't just a threat anymore. This was them at her doorstep, their menace palpable, about to burst through. Before the door could give way, before her terror could fully consume her, a sudden, swift movement outside. A blur of dark suits. Minjun's men. They seemed to materialize out of the very shadows, two hulking figures appearing silently, blocking the doorway where Cho and another shark were struggling with the lock. There was no shout, no warning, just an immediate, unyielding presence. Minjun's men didn't draw weapons, didn't make a sound. They simply were. Their sheer mass, their disciplined stillness, radiated a silent, undeniable threat, more potent than any blade. Cho straightened, his face contorted in frustrated rage. "What the hell do you want? Get out of our way! That bitch owes us!" The security men remained silent, their eyes unreadable, their postures unyielding. They didn't move an inch, but their bodies formed an impenetrable wall. The second shark, a younger, more nervous-looking man, took a step back, sensing the shift in power. He knew these men. Everyone in this world knew Minjun's men. "You think your boss can just take what's ours?" Cho snarled, his voice rising in desperation. He pulled out a knife, a flash of dull silver in the dim hallway light, but he didn't raise it. He just held it, a pathetic attempt at bravado against the stoic, unmoving wall of muscle. One of Minjun's men finally spoke. His voice, a low, gravelly rumble, devoid of emotion. "This property is under Mr. Park's protection. You will leave. Now." The words were a decree, not a request. Cho's face paled. He looked from the unwavering eyes of the security men to the silent, threatening knife in his own hand, then back to the door he'd failed to breach. He knew he was outmatched. He knew the code. With a final, frustrated snarl, Cho shoved the knife back into his pocket. "This isn't over," he spat, his voice trembling. With impotent fury, he grabbed his accomplice, and after a tense standoff that felt like an eternity, they retreated, disappearing back down the hallway, their heavy footsteps fading into the distance. Tessa sagged against the wall, tears finally spilling down her face, a mix of sheer terror and overwhelming relief. It had been so close, so terrifyingly close. Minjun's men, silent guardians, had truly saved her. She saw them now, through the peephole, standing guard for another moment before. Melting away, leaving the hallway empty, save for the faint scent of fear and the lingering echoes of Cho's threat. Her phone vibrated in her hand. It was Minjun. She answered, her voice trembling. "They were here," she whispered, the words catching in her throat. "I know," he said, his voice a calm, steady anchor. "My men intercepted them. Are you harmed?" "No," she managed. "But they found me." "How?" A beat of silence. "They are desperate. They are escalating. This was a test, Tessa, of my resolve and yours." His voice hardened slightly. "They will not try again, not like this. My men made sure of that." He didn't elaborate, but she understood. The silent confrontation had spoken volumes. His code: no harm to families, financial restitution over violence. His men had ensured their departure without bloodshed, but with an undeniable display of power. He wouldn't kill them, but he would break their spirit. A strange wave of certainty washed over her, cutting through the lingering fear. She was shaken, profoundly so, but she also felt a deepening, undeniable trust. Min-jun had promised protection, and he had delivered. He had shown her his code in action, a strange mix of absolute control and principled restraint. He truly would protect her and her baby. "We turn this against them," Tessa said, her voice still shaky, but firm with a new resolve. "Their desperation, their arrogance, we use it." She knew with chilling clarity that the danger was pervasive, that his world was ruthless, but she also knew that within that ruthlessness, Min-jun offered a path to justice. She was no longer just a protected victim. She was a fighter, and she would use this close call to fuel her resolve. The adrenaline from the close call still thrummed beneath Tessa's skin, a frantic drumbeat against her baby's gentle movements. Cho's snarl, the flash of his knife, the sheer audacity of them finding her safe house. It had all solidified something inside her. Fear was still a cold companion, but it was no longer paralyzing. It was a fuel, burning away the last vestiges of her hesitation. She had promised herself and Min-jun that she would fight. Now she would. She spread out the documents Min-jun had provided on the gleaming minimalist table in her living room. The forged co-signer papers, copies of fake loan agreements, anonymous bank statements he'd somehow acquired. They were a jumbled mess of legal jargon and numbers designed to confuse, to intimidate. But Tessa, a violinist by nature, thrived on precision, on finding the pattern in chaos. She approached the pile like a complex score, searching for a discordant note, a misplaced rhythm. Her fingers, usually nimble on violin strings, now traced lines of text, highlighted unusual figures. The prenatal clinic bracelet on her wrist snagged occasionally on the paper, a constant reminder of the life she was protecting, the future she was fighting for. Hours blurred into a single, focused stream. She cross-referenced names, dates, amounts. Most of it was boilerplate, designed to look legitimate, but then she started to notice it. A series of small, consistent payments, not to individuals, not to large corporations, but to an entity called the Koreatown Benevolent Fund. It appeared frequently, tucked into the footnotes of ledgers, listed as a community outreach donation on some of the shadier bank statements. Her brow furrowed. Benevolent Fund. It sounded innocuous, wholesome even, but it was there too often. In too many of the suspicious documents, the amounts were small enough not to raise immediate flags, but added up, they were significant. And the timing of these donations often coincided with a particularly large debt collection, or a new batch of forged contracts. It was a funnel, she realized, her heart picking up speed, a way to launder the dirty money, to give it a clean face. This wasn't just about street thugs and their loan shark schemes. This was bigger. Much bigger. Her fingers trembled slightly as she pulled up publicly available information on the Koreatown Benevolent Fund. Its mission statement was glowing, its board members listed as respected community figures. But the address was vague, a P.O. box or a shared office space, no tangible presence. It was a ghost, a shell. The sharks weren't just preying on individuals, they were parasitically feeding on the very community Min-jun claimed to protect, using a fake charity as their cover. This gave them an air of legitimacy, a way to move their illicit gains without suspicion. It made them a far more entrenched, dangerous and insidious threat than she had first imagined. They weren't just low-level thugs. They had a sophisticated, corrupt infrastructure. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. Min-jun answered on the first ring, his voice calm as always, but with an underlying current of readiness. "I found something," Tessa blurted out, her voice tight with a mix of excitement and dread. The payments, all those small ones, they're funneling the money through a fake charity, the Koreatown Benevolent Fund. It's a front, Minjun, a massive money laundering operation. A beat of silence on the other end, a pause that stretched, thick with unspoken implications. Then Minjun's voice, a low hum of confirmation. I suspected as much. You found the thread, Tessa. There was a new inflection in his tone, a note of impressed approval that sent a strange warmth through her. Excellent work. Tell me everything. She laid out her findings, her analytical mind piecing together the puzzle for him, her observations sharp and precise. As she spoke, she could almost feel his presence, his intense focus, his acknowledgement of her intelligence. This wasn't just about her needing his protection anymore. This was about a shared purpose, a dangerous, exhilarating alliance forged in the crucible of their opposing worlds. So, exposing the charity, she finished, looking at the document still spread across the table. That's the key. That's how we truly stop them. Indeed, Minjun replied, his voice firm, resolute. But how we do that, how we bring down a legitimate-looking organization without drawing unwanted attention to our methods or to you, that, Tessa, is the next puzzle. The question hung in the air, a new challenge. They had found the flaw in the trap, the Achilles heel of the Shark's operation. But how to exploit it? How to dismantle it without bloodshed, without sacrificing their own principles, remained uncertain. The game had just escalated, and Tessa, no longer just a victim, felt a dangerous thrill ignite within her. The discovery of the Koreatown Benevolent Fund had opened a new, terrifying door, but also a path forward. Tessa and Minjun spent hours in the opulent office, hunched over his sleek tablet, dissecting every scrap of information. The plan was taking shape, fragile but potent. They needed to force a public audit, an undeniable spotlight on the fraudulent charity. Minjun was cautious, pragmatic, focused on strategy, on leverage. Tessa, however, felt a growing impatience, a fierce need for action. Her baby's kicks were a constant, insistent rhythm against her ribs, urging her on. The audit needs to be initiated by someone beyond reproach, Minjun explained, his voice low, his eyes scanning financial reports. Someone with legitimate standing in the community. Otherwise, it will be dismissed as a vendetta, or worse, expose our hand prematurely. Tessa nodded, her mind already racing. That meant she couldn't be the one to directly trigger it. Not yet. Her connection to the Sharks was too personal, too easily twisted. They needed an external force. But who? A few days later, the need for a prenatal checkup offered a momentary reprieve from the relentless planning. The Koreatown Prenatal Clinic was a small, brightly lit oasis, a stark contrast to the shadows of Minjun's world. Tessa sat in the waiting room, her hand instinctively touching the thin plastic of her prenatal clinic bracelet, a tiny, comforting anchor in her tumultuous life. The air smelled of disinfectant and faint baby powder, a world away from the metallic tang of fear. She picked up a worn magazine, pretending to read, but her ears were perked, always alert. Two nurses, their voices soft, were chatting quietly at the reception desk, their words drifting over the gentle hum of the waiting room. "Did you hear?" one whispered, her tone laced with admiration. "Another donation came in from our anonymous benefactor, just when we needed it most for the new ultrasound machine." The other nurse sighed wistfully. "Bless them. I don't know where we'd be without their generosity, always so quiet, so discreet. And the orchids they send every month, always those rare white ones, the ones Dr. Lee loves so much." Tessa froze. Her heart gave a sudden hard lurch, rare white orchids. Cold shock ran through her, then a jolt of recognition. She knew those orchids. She had seen them. They were in Minjun's office, a perpetually fresh arrangement on a low, polished table near the window. She had even noticed them in the safe apartment he'd given her, a smaller, delicate spray of the same pristine white blooms. She'd dismissed them as simply expensive decor, a sign of his austere taste. But now, the pieces slammed into place with a sickening, undeniable clarity. Anonymous. Benefactor. Quiet, discreet, rare white orchids. The clinic, a beacon of hope for so many vulnerable women, a place of safety for unborn lives, was kept afloat by an anonymous donor. And that donor. Tessa felt the blood drain from her face. It couldn't be. The man who commanded a shadowy organization, who spoke of financial restitution and community protection with a chilling, calculated intensity. The man who had pulled her from the jaws of loan sharks and into his dangerous orbit. He was also the quiet, anonymous patron of a prenatal clinic. Minjun Park. He was the anonymous donor. A profound, dizzying jolt went through her. The monster had a heart, a deeply hidden, fiercely protected core of genuine benevolence. His code of honor wasn't just a convenient justification for his power. It was a profound, unwavering commitment to the community he claimed to serve, a quiet, almost spiritual act of upholding life. Her perception of him, carefully constructed from fear and grudging. Respect, shattered, then reformed into something infinitely more complex, more dangerous, and utterly captivating. He wasn't just a protector, he was a builder. He wasn't just about control, but about care. The man who commanded shadows also nurtured light. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow, leaving her breathless. It changed everything. It didn't just reveal a profound duality in him, it revealed a new path to justice, a way to leverage his secret, his deep-seated commitment to the community, to expose the very corruption he hated. A dangerous, thrilling idea sparked in her mind, a powerful leverage she hadn't possessed before. She had found his vulnerability, not a weakness, but a profound, undeniable strength, and she knew exactly how she would use it. The revelation pulsed through Tessa, a raw, electric current that left her breathless. Minjun Park, the anonymous donor, the man who moved in shadows, who commanded silent power, was also the quiet guardian of light, the unseen hand protecting vulnerable lives. Her mind raced, a dizzying spiral of disbelief and a surging fierce clarity. This wasn't just a detail, it was a weapon. His secret, a testament to his true code, was the leverage she needed. She didn't wait. The moment her checkup was done, Tessa practically flew out of the clinic, her feet barely touching the pavement. The jade key fob felt heavy in her pocket, a reminder of his protection. But now, it felt different. Less like a gift, more like a pawn in a game. She was suddenly in a position to win. She hailed a cab, her destination Minjun's downtown office. Her heart hammered with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. She was about to confront him, to push him, to test the very limits of his elusive honor. Minjun was in his office, just as she'd known he would be, a solitary figure against the vast cityscape. The rare white orchids, fresh and elegant, sat on the low table, a silent, damning accusation. He looked up. As she entered, his expression unreadable, but a flicker of something in his dark eyes suggested he sensed the shift in her. He knew. Tessa didn't bother with pleasantries. She walked straight to the table, her gaze fixed on the pristine petals. "The Koreatown Prenatal Clinic," she said, her voice low, trembling with a mixture of anger and a strange, potent respect. "The anonymous benefactor. The rare white orchids they receive every month." She met his gaze, her chin lifting in defiance. You, isn't it? A beat of absolute silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken truths. Minjun didn't flinch. He didn't deny it. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, a subtle shift that betrayed nothing but acknowledgement. He simply held her gaze. His eyes, usually so guarded, now held a depth she hadn't seen before, a quiet intensity that was both intimidating and profoundly vulnerable. My commitment to this community extends beyond certain operations, he finally said, his voice a low, steady rumble, devoid of apology or boast. Children, families, they are innocent, they are to be protected, always. It is a fundamental aspect of my code. He paused, his gaze sweeping over her, lingering on her abdomen. It is not for recognition, only for protection. The words, so stark, so matter-of-fact, sent another shiver through her. He truly believed in it. This wasn't a front. It was the core of him, buried deep beneath layers of darkness. And in that moment, Tessa felt a surge of unexpected power. Not just over him, but over the entire situation. She had found his true north. Then you understand, don't you? Tessa pressed, her voice gaining strength, conviction. You understand how abhorrent it is that these loan sharks, these men who threaten pregnant women, are funneling their dirty money through a fake charity, a charity that pretends to help the community while you're out there, silently trying to save it. His eyes narrowed, a cold fire sparking in their depths. He didn't need her to spell it out. He saw the hypocrisy, the insult to his own code. You have a board seat at the prenatal clinic, don't you? Tessa continued, taking a step closer, her voice now firm, unwavering. A discreet, anonymous board seat. You help fund them, you help guide them. You are one of their most trusted benefactors. Minjun didn't confirm it with words, but his silent, steady gaze was all the answer she needed. Then use it, she demanded, the words a challenge. Dare, use that position, use your leverage within that clinic to force a public audit, a full, undeniable forensic audit of their finances. It will be legitimate, it will be above board, and when they dig deep enough, they will find the funnel, they will find the Koreatown Benevolent Fund, they will expose the sharks for what they truly are. The air crackled between them, thick with the audacity of her proposal. She was asking him to expose his own quiet benevolence, to risk his carefully cultivated anonymity, all to bring down the very corruption he hated. It was a dangerous, brilliant move. Minjun studied her, his expression a complex tapestry of calculation and something else, something akin to grudging admiration. He saw the risk. He saw the potential consequences, but he also saw the strategic brilliance, the moral righteousness of her demand. It aligned perfectly with his desire for true debt justice, not just quiet erasure. It was a path that protected the community, exposed the insidious rot, and upheld his deepest unspoken code, a slow, deliberate nod. It is a bold strategy, Tessa O'Connor, he said, his voice a low hum of agreement. And it is precisely what we will do. His gaze locked with hers, a silent pact forged in the crucible of their opposing wills and their undeniable shared purpose. In that moment, the last vestiges of her fear melted away, replaced by a profound, if dangerous, trust. He had agreed. He would stand with her. Not just as her protector, but as her partner. The battle had just truly begun, and the unspoken attraction between them, once a subtle current, now pulsed with the undeniable heat of a shared mission. Minjun's agreement had been a quiet earthquake in Tessa's world, shifting everything into a dangerous, exhilarating new alignment. The public audit, initiated discreetly through his anonymous board seat at the clinic, was already sending tremors through Koreatown's financial underworld. News articles, initially innocuous reports about enhanced transparency in local charities, slowly began to pick apart the threads of the Koreatown Benevolent Fund. Tessa saw the shark's desperation growing, a palpable tension in the street she now navigated with a heightened, almost predatory awareness. Their usual haunts were buzzing with hushed, frantic conversations. The cracks in their carefully constructed facade were beginning to show. She and Minjun spent long hours in his office, the cityscape glittering. Outside, like a million watchful eyes, their discussions were intense, fueled by strong coffee and an unspoken urgency. The initial plan, a mere sketch, was now a meticulously detailed blueprint, every contingency mapped out, every risk assessed. Minjun's mind was a fortress of strategy, calm and calculating, even as Tessa's pulse raced with the danger of it all. She felt his respect, a silent acknowledgement of her intelligence, her unwavering focus. The audit will expose their funneling, Minjun explained, his finger tracing a line on a digital map of Koreatown's intricate tunnels. But we need the physical evidence. The actual forged contracts. That is where you come in, Tessa. Her agency, her purpose, was paramount. She would be the visible catalyst, the face of the injustice. Her story, carefully crafted to expose the fraud without explicitly naming Minjun or his organization, would lend undeniable legitimacy to the audit. But the climax, the moment of truth, required her to step into the heart of the danger. "The midnight tunnel sting," he said, his voice low, his eyes meeting hers, a silent question in their depths. "It's risky, but it's the only way to seize the contracts without bloodshed, without direct confrontation. They will try to move them once the audit starts to bite." Tessa swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. The thought of being in a dark tunnel surrounded by dangerous men made her stomach clench. But then she thought of the clinic, of the other. Women of her baby. This wasn't just for her anymore. This was for justice. "I'll do it," she said, her voice firm, unwavering. Minjun nodded, a slow, approving tilt of his head. "Good. Your role is precise. Your violin." Her violin, the rosin-stained case, her constant companion, suddenly felt like a key to something far greater than music. He had seen it, understood its significance to her. "You will be positioned here." He indicated a spot near a specific tunnel security camera, a tiny red dot on the map. "At the precise moment after my men have blocked their vehicles, you will play a short phrase, something clear, distinctive. That will be the cue." Tessa's mind instantly conjured melodies, a single, piercing note, a brief, haunting arpeggio. It was a language she understood, a power she possessed. Her music, usually a solace, would now be a signal, a siren call for justice. "Reporters, briefed by the clinic staff and myself, will be waiting at the far exit," Minjun continued, his gaze intense. "They will descend the moment they hear your cue. Clinic staff will be with them, ready to identify victims, to lend credibility. The police, already aware of the audit's findings, will move in to secure the contracts. The tunnel security camera will document the entire event, providing irrefutable evidence without revealing our methods." Every detail was meticulously planned, a symphony of strategy and timing. Her music, her presence, her story, all essential. The danger was immense, but so was the potential for profound change. Their relationship, once a tense standoff, had solidified into something deeper, more complex. Minjun saw her strength, her intelligence, not just her vulnerability. And Tessa, despite the fear, saw his honor, his protective instincts shining through the shadows of his world. Their shared purpose had forged a bond, a dangerous, undeniable attraction that hummed beneath every focused discussion. The stage was set. The blueprint was complete, and Tessa, a violinist with a baby on the way, was ready to play her part. The public audit, Minjun's quiet weapon, was tearing through Koreatown like wildfire. Tessa saw the headlines everywhere. Local news channels dissecting the Koreatown Benevolent Fund, community forums buzzing with outrage. The facade was crumbling, and the sharks, once so untouchable, were scrambling. Tessa observed them from her secure apartment, watching the feeds from Minjun's network of cameras, her heart thumping with a mixture of dread and grim satisfaction. Their desperation was palpable. Cho, the man who had threatened her in the alley, looked haggard, his face etched with panic. She saw him and others moving boxes in and out of unmarked vans in the dead of night, their movements hurried, furtive. They were trying to hide, to destroy the incriminating forged contracts, the very evidence that would bring them down. The thought of them escaping, of their insidious trap continuing to ensnare others, fueled Tessa's resolve. This had to end. Minjun's office became their war room. They spent every waking hour there, refining the plan, a complex dance of timing and precision. The air was thick with the scent of his expensive cologne and the quiet hum of his high-tech displays, a world away from her violin practice, yet just as demanding. "The police are on standby," Minjun stated, his finger tracing a route on a digital map of downtown tunnels. "They will be briefed on the audit's findings, on the depth of the fraud, but they will not be involved until the critical moment. We need irrefutable evidence of the contracts being moved." His gaze met hers, a silent acknowledgement of the tightrope they walked. His code demanded no bloodshed, no direct confrontation, only the seizure of evidence. Tessa reviewed her carefully crafted statement for the media, her story of a young, pregnant musician targeted by predatory lenders. It was true, every agonizing word of it, yet it carefully phrased to protect Minjun's anonymity, his hidden hand. She practiced her delivery, her voice firm, resolute. This wasn't just a performance, it was a plea for justice. The clinic staff, brave and committed, were ready. They had collected testimonies from other victims, women who, like Tessa, had been ensnared by the sharks' fraudulent papers. They would be at the tunnel exit, a visible testament to the widespread damage, ready to identify themselves and their stories to the waiting reporters. This was more than a sting, it was a community rising up. "Your cue," Minjun reiterated, his voice low, his dark eyes intense, "must be unmistakable. A short, clear phrase. It will trigger the entire sequence." Tessa nodded, her fingers instinctively flexing as if around her violin bow. She had chosen a fragment from a Sibelius concerto, a haunting, insistent melody that spoke of struggle and eventual triumph. It would cut through the tunnel's echoing silence, a beacon in the darkness. Their shared purpose had solidified their bond, making their unspoken attraction impossible to ignore. In these tense hours, Minjun no longer felt just like her protector, but a true partner. She saw the unwavering strength in him, the meticulous planning, the deep-seated honor that drove him. He, in turn, looked at her with a respect that warmed her even in the sterile coolness of his office, a silent appreciation for her intelligence, her courage, her fierce, unwavering spirit. He trusted her, and she, despite the danger, trusted him completely. The final details were locked into place, precise timings, exit routes, the exact positioning of Minjun's men to block the sharks' vehicles without violence. Every contingency was addressed. The air in the office crackled with anticipation, a heavy electric hum. The stage was set. The dark, echoing tunnels of downtown Los Angeles awaited. Tessa knew with a chilling certainty that tonight her music would not just be heard, it would be justice. The air in the downtown tunnel was thick and cold, smelling of exhaust fumes and damp concrete. It pressed in on Tessa, a heavy blanket of darkness broken only by the anemic orange glow of sparse streetlights overhead. Each distant drip of water echoed like a gunshot in the cavernous space. This was it, the midnight tunnel sting. Tessa clutched her rosin-stained violin case, the smooth wood a familiar comfort against her trembling fingers. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, desperate rhythm that threatened to drown out the silence. She was nervous, terrified even, but beneath the fear, a steel-hard resolve had taken root. She was doing this for her baby, for every other woman caught in the shark's insidious trap. She stood at the predetermined point, a small, almost invisible figure near the hulking lens of a tunnel security camera. It was her witness, her silent ally. She imagined its unblinking eye capturing every detail, every truth that was about to unfold. The adrenaline coursed through her, a burning river that made her vision sharper, her senses hyper-aware. Every shadow seemed to shift, every distant rumble sounded like an approaching threat. Then the low thrum of engines grew louder. Two dark SUVs, nondescript and menacing, rumbled into the tunnel, their headlights cutting through the gloom. They pulled to a stop 100 feet away, their beams illuminating stacks of cardboard boxes in the back of one, visible through the tinted windows. Tessa's breath hitched. The contracts. The doors opened and figures spilled out. Cho was there, his face tight with stress, barking orders, and then the shark boss himself, Kim. He moved with an agitated energy, his eyes darting, overseeing his men as they began to unload the boxes, clearly intending to destroy the evidence. His face was a mask of furious desperation, a stark contrast to his earlier predatory calm. He was rattled. Good. Tessa's gaze flickered. She saw them now. Minjun's men, not overtly aggressive, not drawing attention but subtly, definitively, blocking the tunnel's narrow exit. Their dark sedans, blending with the shadows, were positioned with an almost imperceptible precision, creating an inescapable net. They were silent, unmoving, their presence radiating an undeniable, controlled power. No weapons drawn, just an absolute, unyielding blockade. Minjun's code in action. Her fingers, despite the cold, felt slick with sweat on the neck of her violin. It was still in its case, a silent promise. She watched Kim's men, their movements frantic, their voices low and urgent. They were about to destroy everything. Her eyes fixed on the boxes, seeing the telltale stacks of thick papers, some of them already loose, revealing the crisp edges of notarized contracts, the prominent, perfectly circular red thumbprints glaring like blood against the white. Evidence. So much evidence. A whimper threatened to escape her, but she swallowed it down. This was the moment. She could feel the tension in the air, a physical weight pressing down on her. The sharks were busy, their backs to her, oblivious to the trap tightening around them. The tunnel air hummed with unspoken danger, with the imminent clash of worlds. Tessa took a deep, shuddering breath, trying to steady her racing heart. She could hear the frantic whispers of Kim's men, the scuff of their shoes against the concrete, the heavy thud of boxes being moved. She knew Minjun was watching, somewhere in the shadows, his unseen presence a palpable force. He trusted her. She had to do this. Her hand reached for the latch on her violin case. The cold metal was a shock against her clammy skin. This was it. The wait was over. The symphony of justice was about to begin. The cold metal of the violin case latch clicked open, a small, sharp sound that seemed to echo in the vast, silent tunnel. Tessa's fingers, still trembling, found the smooth, cool wood of her instrument. Then, the familiar curve of the bow. She drew it out, the polished surface glinting faintly in the weak overhead lights. Kim and his men were still focused on their frantic task, their backs to her, oblivious. The boxes of forged contracts lay exposed, damning evidence. This was it, the moment. A tiny, almost imperceptible buzz vibrated against her earlobe, a subtle signal from Minjun's concealed earpiece. Now. Tessa took a deep, shuddering breath, the tunnel air cold in her lungs. She raised the violin to her chin, the familiar weight a steadying presence. Her bow hovered over the strings. For a fraction of a second, the world narrowed to this instrument, this one, clear purpose. Then her fingers moved, and the first note sang out. It was a short, clear phrase, a haunting, insistent melody from Sibelius, chosen for its piercing quality. The sound cut through the tunnel's oppressive silence, pure and resonant, echoing off the concrete walls with an almost supernatural clarity. It wasn't a cry of pain, but a beacon, a call to arms. Kim and his men froze. The frantic movement stopped. Heads snapped up, eyes wide with confusion and dawning horror. They looked wildly around, trying to pinpoint the source of the unexpected music, their faces a sudden mask of panic. And then the trap sprung. From the far end of the tunnel, a blinding flash erupted, followed by another and another. A cacophony of camera shutters clicked, a sudden, overwhelming surge of light and noise. Reporters, a swarm of them, poured into the tunnel, their flashes illuminating the scene like a lightning storm. They carried microphones, notebooks, and an insatiable hunger for truth. With them came the clinic staff, their faces grim but resolute, holding simple hand-drawn signs that read, "Justice for Koreatown families," and "Stop predatory lending." Their presence, ordinary people caught in an extraordinary moment, lent an undeniable weight to the chaos. Kim's men, caught completely off guard, screamed, some dropping the boxes they were carrying. They scrambled for their vehicles, their initial panic morphing into desperate flight. But Minjun's men, silent and efficient, moved with an almost surgical precision. Their dark sedans, strategically positioned, now shifted, subtly but firmly blocking the sharks' escape routes. There were no sirens yet, no shouting, no drawn weapons, just an unyielding wall of dark metal and unmoving bodies. They didn't touch the sharks, didn't threaten them directly. They simply ensured there was nowhere to go. The loan sharks were trapped, their vehicles were boxed in, their exits sealed, their faces contorted with rage and fear, their frantic attempts to maneuver their cars futile against the unyielding blockade. The reporters surged forward, their questions flying like arrows, their cameras flashing, documenting every second of the unfolding disaster for Kim and his crew. Then, from the tunnel's entrance, the wail of sirens finally pierced. The night, growing louder, closer, uniformed police cars, lights flashing red and blue, streamed in. They moved swiftly, purposefully, having been fully briefed on the audit's findings, on the depth of the fraud. They moved past Minjun's unmoving men, straight to the now abandoned boxes of contracts. "Secure the evidence!" a police officer's voice boomed, cutting through the chaos. Tessa watched, her violin still clutched in her hand, her body trembling with the aftershocks of adrenaline and profound relief. Officers were already swarming the boxes, carefully sealing them, marking them for evidence. The notarized contracts, with their glaring red thumbprints, were being seized, one by one. The tunnel security camera, its lens unblinking, captured every single frame, every single detail, providing irrefutable proof. Kim, his face ashen, his bravado utterly shattered, stood surrounded by flashing cameras, his men already being cuffed. His operation, once so secure, so insidious, was exposed. The lie was laid bare. A wave of exhaustion washed over Tessa, so profound it almost buckled her knees, but beneath it a fierce, triumphant joy soared through her. It was over. The sharks were caught, their trap dismantled. Her music, a quiet call in the darkness, had brought the symphony of justice to life. The aftermath of the tunnel sting was a whirlwind of flashing lights and shouted questions, a chaotic symphony of justice. Tessa, still clutching her violin, was whisked away, not by the police, but by Minjun's men, a silent, protective barrier between her and the hungry media. She watched the news reports from the safety of Minjun's penthouse, her body aching with exhaustion, her mind buzzing with a dizzying mix of terror and triumph. The headline screamed, "Koreatown loan shark ring busted! Pregnant whistleblower exposes fraudulent charity." The Koreatown Benevolent Fund was revealed as a sham, a sophisticated money laundering operation. Kim and his men were charged, their faces plastered across every screen, their predatory contracts voided. The stories of other victims, brave women who had stepped forward with the clinic staff, flooded the airwaves. Tessa O'Connor, the conservatory violinist, was hailed as a hero, a brave whistleblower who had risked everything. The main conflict was resolved. Her baby was safe. The fear that had stalked her for months, the gnawing anxiety that had threatened to consume her, was finally gone. A profound, bone-deep relief washed over her, leaving her weak but utterly free. She was no longer just a victim. She was a force. Days bled into a week of quiet reflection. Tessa spent hours simply holding her violin, not playing, just feeling its familiar weight. She walked through Minjun's opulent apartment, no longer feeling trapped but truly safe. She thought of her journey, from the desperate crying girl in the alley to the woman who had stood defiant in a dark tunnel, her music a call for justice. She was empowered. She was free, but freedom, she realized, came with its own set of choices. Minjun was there, a constant, unwavering presence. He didn't intrude, didn't demand. He simply existed in the periphery, a silent anchor. He brought her tea, left her space, his dark eyes watching her with an intensity that spoke volumes. He offered continued, unspoken support, but crucially, he respected her autonomy. He waited for her to speak, for her to decide. One evening, as the city lights began to twinkle outside the penthouse windows, Tessa found him standing by the floor-to-ceiling glass, his silhouette framed against the vast expanse. She walked up to him, her heart beating a steady rhythm of anticipation. She stood at a crossroads, two paths stretching before her. One was a return to her old life, music school, anonymity, a life free of shadows, but also perhaps free of purpose. The other was Minjun, and everything he represented. "They're all gone," she said, her voice quiet, but steady. "The sharks, the fear." Minjun nodded, his gaze still fixed on the city below. "The system is dismantled, for now." "And me?" Tessa asked, meeting his eyes, a flicker of vulnerability quickly overshadowed by her firm resolve. "What about me, Minjun?" He turned then, his dark eyes searching hers, his expression unreadable. "You are free, Tessa. You have earned your freedom. Your choices are your own." His voice was low, resonant, devoid of any attempt to sway her. "My protection remains, if you wish it, but it is a choice you must make, not a condition." She took a deep breath. This was it, the moment to affirm her agency, not by running from his world, but by defining her terms within it. She felt the undeniable pull towards him, a dangerous, thrilling attraction forged in shared purpose and mutual respect. He hadn't tried to possess her, only to protect her, to empower her. "I choose to stay," Tessa said, her voice clear, firm, but not as someone protected or someone owned, as your partner, as an ally in this community you fight for. She stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. "On my terms, Minjun, with clear boundaries, a relationship built on mutual respect, not possession." A slow, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of Minjun's lips, a rare, genuine warmth in his eyes. He reached out, his hand gently cupping her cheek, his touch surprisingly tender. "Your terms, Tessa O'Connor, always." His promise was a silent affirmation, a new kind of contract, sealed not with a red thumbprint, but with understanding, trust, and the potent, undeniable hum of their shared future. She had chosen, and in that choice she found not just safety, but a profound sense of self, a powerful new beginning. Months later, the air in the Koreatown prenatal clinic was thick with warmth and anticipation, a stark contrast to the cold fear Tessa had once known. The audit had worked. The Koreatown Benevolent Fund had been fully exposed, its fraudulent tendrils severed. The clinic, once struggling, was now thriving, overflowing with renewed community trust and vibrant energy. Tonight, it buzzed with the chatter of grateful families, the scent of fresh flowers, and the promise of new beginnings. It was their major fundraiser, a celebration of resilience. Tessa stood backstage, her violin a familiar, comforting weight in her hands. She wore a simple, elegant dress that skimmed her body, no longer hiding the subtle curve of her abdomen. Her baby was due soon, a constant, joyful flutter beneath her heart. The worn prenatal clinic bracelet, once a symbol of her hidden vulnerability, now felt like a badge of honor, a testament to the journey she had survived, to the future she was building. She was nervous, her palms damp, but this wasn't the terror of an alley or the cold dread of a tunnel. This was a performer's jitters, the exhilarating hum before a shared melody. She scanned the packed room through a small gap. In the curtain, Min-jun was there as she knew he would be. He sat in the back, discreetly, almost blending into the shadows, yet radiating an undeniable presence. He wasn't in his usual tailored suit, but a slightly softer, equally impeccable dark jacket, less formal, more approachable. His dark eyes found hers across the room, a silent connection, a proud, supportive gaze that sent a familiar warmth through her. She noticed the subtle gleam of his jade key fob tucked into his belt, a tiny, vibrant green against the dark fabric. It was a subtle reminder of their past, of the dangerous bridge they had built, and the unique foundation of their bond. The clinic director stepped forward, her voice ringing with emotion. "And now, please welcome our special guest, a woman who embodies courage, talent, and hope, Ms. Tessa O'Connor." Tessa took a deep breath, the Sibelius fragment from the tunnel echoing briefly in her mind, then giving way to a new, brighter melody. She walked onto the small stage, the applause, a gentle wave washing over her. She smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that reached her eyes. This wasn't just a performance. It was a thank you, a promise, a song of hope. She raised her violin, the bow a feather-light extension of her arm. The first notes filled the room, a soaring, lyrical piece that spoke of resilience, of beauty found in unexpected places. Her music was richer now, imbued with the depths of her experience, the tenderness of impending motherhood, the strength forged in fire. She played for the audience, for the clinic, for her baby, and in a quiet corner of her heart, she played for Min-jun. When the last note faded, the room erupted. Tessa lowered her violin, bowing deeply, her heart full. She looked again at Min-jun. He was standing now, a subtle, almost imperceptible nod of approval, a rare, soft smile gracing his lips. It was a smile that spoke of shared battles, of mutual respect, of a quiet, growing love. Later, in the quiet after the fundraiser, Min-jun found her by the clinic's new rose garden, a symbol of the community's renewed vitality. The night air was cool, carrying the sweet scent of blossoms. "You were magnificent, Tessa," he said, his voice a low, resonant hum next to her. "Truly magnificent." She leaned into his presence, feeling the familiar comfort of his quiet strength. It felt right, she whispered, to play here, to be here. He reached out, his hand gently covering hers, not possessive, but steady. Reassuring, his touch sent a familiar spark through her, a warmth that had nothing to do with fear. Their romance was slow, deliberately so, built on clear boundaries and a profound mutual understanding. It wasn't a whirlwind, but a deep, steady current flowing forward. "The clinic will thrive," Min-jun said, his gaze sweeping over the building, a quiet satisfaction in his tone. "It is a testament to what is possible when a community is protected." Tessa nodded, looking at her prenatal clinic. Bracelet no longer a symbol of vulnerability, but of the hope it now represented for her and her child. This clinic, once anonymously supported by Min-jun, now stood as a testament to their shared efforts, to debt justice, to a community made better by their unique partnership. Her future, once so uncertain, stretched before her, clear and bright. A baby, a career in music, and a man who walked in shadows, yet nurtured the light. It was a strange, beautiful harmony, a forward-looking melody she was ready to embrace. If you enjoyed the video, tell us where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel to keep up with our content.